This is part 2 of repairing carbon fiber fairings for motorcycles. This is Vlad's Buell. This is part 2, and we intend to put some carbon fiber down today, and we'll share the info. So this is part 2 of the Buell day 2. I don't even know how to say this. It's turned out to be a much bigger job than I thought, but considering that these parts go for about $1,000 and then you'd have to paint them, I'm wondering if it's going to work out fine. Anyway, we're going to put today's session in. We're going to try to finish up these two parts, and then everything's going to have to sit overnight before we do the final finish on everything. Now, obviously, we have the same issues we're dealing with is cracks, chunks. In this case, we have a piece missing up here that's going to be pretty labor intensive to recreate. You're going to have to make patterns on it. I think I'll save that for the end. But most of these other pieces that need cracks, Vlad put, when he was here, he put tape on all the areas he wanted reinforced. And, of course, like everything in motorcycling, it's going to be a labor of love. Now, on this part, of course, this is different than the parts we did yesterday. There's a part where it's rubbing on probably the engine, and it's, I would say, it's probably the thickness of a piece of paper from rubbing through on the other side. I don't know. And then if it came through, you'd have to repaint this whole thing and get another decal. Wow. So what we're going to do is, before we even work on the cracks and stuff, I want to sand this area down, and I want to get a piece of relatively thick carbon fiber in here, because the odds are good it's going to keep rubbing, and it'll give it a couple of years of rubbing before it's a problem. But each one of these parts is unique. Now, if you haven't seen the two videos before this, one was the intro, and I did that just to keep the videos from getting too long. But keeping it, all the information on the video before this, and we do post up something every day, almost every day, what that would be the cornerstone of doing this, or leading up to this. Now, this piece alone, I want to get a piece of carbon fiber, cut it to that shape, and of course, it's very, very similar to what we did on the video before this. Now, one of the things that makes this a satisfying part to work on is knowing how expensive these parts are. I was shocked to see that a set of these parts is $1,000. I had no idea. But yeah, it's an expensive motorcycle too. So, but being able to bring things back from the brink of extinction, hey. And I always think the other thing too is when you do this kind of work, the parts are better when you're done, because you've got all the areas that are prone to cracking taken care of. And so it would not, and we've done a lot for Luciano over the years, and parts that I know years later they have not re-cracked. So that's kind of the bottom line. And I think if he doesn't get new bodywork, I think he's going to want to put one of the real fancy paint jobs on this over the winter. Normally we only work in the winter too, so but again, it's a special favor for a special friend, and he's been the best of friends for many years now. Gets me a lot of parts for the motorcycle. Always good advice, and most of all, always been a good friend, a loyal friend. So that counts a lot when you're doing this kind of repair. I don't think I'd want to do this for somebody who was not on my inner circle of the mafia or whatever. Anyway, we're going to just get this part in. This will protect it, hopefully protect it from rubbing through, and then especially if the part has that custom paint on it over the winter, this would be a real problem. Now, I had an idea of something I could do. I was thinking about this. This is a piece, I want to show this, that's actually missing. So what I'm going to try to do is, looking at the other piece, is put some clear plastic tape that the epoxy will not really stick to the way it should, and I'm going to take this piece here and just extend it out here so I have some material to work with, so I can kind of grind and sand that in at some point in time. It's the only realistic way I know, because I have the other part that's supposed to match up to, and I can, when the part is solid, and I can't do it today because the epoxy has to sit overnight, and what will happen is then I can use the other piece for a pattern, just mirror image it over. But when you have a piece missing, this is like Mark Morgan's fairing on the last bike I did for Mark. There were pieces missing of the fairing, and we had to recreate them, and of course that's all on our channel. So I put the two pieces together. This is the one I'm going to have to make a pattern for, but I'm going to bring that material out, and it actually comes all the way out to the edge here. So I can make this, again, out of clear plastic tape, just using that for $1 for a male mold, and just let the epoxy build up in there, and then I'll have to grind and shape it. And you're only going to really see the last little bit. Maybe I could just put a drop of red touch-up paint on there. But this part up here you're not going to see, but it still has to have that correct shape. And you can see how this one is already cracked and broken. That's what we're trying to avoid. This will all get both sides will get reinforced, and I'm hopefully never going to crack again. So this is just heavy-duty Scotch packing tape, and what it does, epoxy is not happy sticking to this. It's kind of like almost like Saran wrap. So if you get this in, and the way I would hope, I'll have a little bit less work and scraping off when I actually try to remove this, and then just use the epoxy and to carve it and sand it into shape. This, believe it or not, this little piece of the job is probably going to take more than a lot of the parts that you think take all day. And so far, this has become a very time-consuming job. So this is the tape here. And I'm just going to put a couple layers on there, because I'm going to lay this carbon fiber right out in here and just let the epoxy just sit there. And it's got to obviously sit overnight before we can do anything. But while that's drying, and while I can keep shaping it and moving it, then I'll work on the rest of these parts. And some of these are kind of redundant to fix. We've done a lot of that yesterday. The holes, there's no point putting that on video anymore. This is the one that's going to be a difficult part, and getting all these holes filled in. Now again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but there's no other realistic way I know to do it. And the only piece you're going to really see, in fact, you're not even going to see that, it's just one little tip. But this part actually is going to be that we want to be able to drill a matching bolt hole in it. You can picture why that broke. Somebody over tightened the bolt, or whatever, vibration, who knows. It's a twin cylinder bike, so you never know. But anyway, that's a pretty creative way of making a buck, so that I'm just going to fill it with a piece of carbon fiber and epoxy. In fact, what I think I'm going to try to do is do this whole thing in one strip. I cut a strip of carbon fiber, and that'll be a unique way to do it. If it works, if it doesn't work, I guess you get your money back. Anyway, we're going to, because before we do anything with the holes, we've got to seal this side up, same as yesterday. Get this sealed up so none of the epoxy comes through and damages the surface. I notice the surface is not in real good shape either. Well, it's not a new motorcycle. Now maybe some of that we can polish out, but I don't know. There's some pretty gougy stuff there. So I cut a strip of carbon, and I'd like that, if I can do that all in one piece, boy, that'll really be nice. And that'll take care of all that in one stroke of the pen. So I'm going to seal these up, and I may as well seal everything up here, and then mix up a batch of epoxy, because I see there's cracks up there, and hopefully this will really make that part of it rigid and less prone to cracking from vibration. It's a very unusual thing to be doing this kind of a repair when you know you're not going to repaint the outside right now. So preserving that finish on the outside is making this job a little trickier than it normally would be, but of course not impossible. I really thought for a long time how I wanted to do this. It looks like it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it really is a big deal to get the curve in and to get it reinforced and to get it all in one strip like that. I thought that was pretty nice. Luckily I had a piece of carbon very similar to that shape. And of course the big thing here is that I don't want this to ever crack again. I don't want to run the risk that here. And I put up 3 or 4 little reinforcements up in the front, and just kept reinforcing that so I can shape that piece in the front later. Now tomorrow when we pull all that tape off, we'll see if we've got even close to the curve, or if we have to fill it in with more carbon fiber or more epoxy or whatever. But I think that's going to really strengthen it up in the spot that it's been cracking the worst. Now the rest of this side is exactly like what we did yesterday. We're going to sand all these down. I've got it blocked off with blue tape. The one over here that's really cracked the worst, I'll make a big piece out of that. And every step of this, it just becomes one step closer to salvaging $1,000. It's actually more, because you got to paint it. So maybe it's $1,500–$1,800 by the time you're done, if you wouldn't, and then it would crack. That's the problem. Now, I know there's a saying for when you're working on this kind of work, or any like building a statue out of marble or something, that the Italians supposedly had, that you have to treat jobs like this as if time doesn't exist. And in this case, I really, one of the things, I try not to look at the clock, or I just drink a lot of coffee, because I know as tedious as this gets and as boring as it gets, somewhere in the very near future, next couple of days, when these parts are all, I've the holes drilled and all the sanding done, all the edging done, maybe I'll even run a buffing wheel over them and hand them back to Vlad. That's going to make me very, very happy to know that we've brought him back from the brink. And sometimes a job like this, you get really frustrated. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy. But I know in the end, I know it's going to be perfect at the end. All right, so that was laid down, and we've got the big flat piece done. That's good. That part where it was rubbing on the engine, now we've got 4 holes to fill in here. And that's pretty redundant, no sense even putting out on video. We get those 4 holes done, and then this part will be ready to set aside and dry overnight before we can do any drilling or grinding. So that's the first of the big parts, and it looks like I'll have just enough time today to finish up. I'll do the other one off camera because it's basically going to be exactly the same thing, except for having that piece that I have to make. So actually it'll go a little quicker, but all the holes are filled in. This is now going to sit overnight, minimum overnight, but even if I let it dry an extra day, it's in my favor, because that epoxy, as time goes by, it hardens up. And when I drill all the holes, they really don't get drilled, they get burned through. I want to get them as accurate as possible, so when these parts all go together, we don't have anything that looks like a drunken Marine. So, but just getting these parts cleaned up now. I'll get the second one sanded down and get the epoxy reinforcements on it, and a couple hours from now we'll be all set to celebrate with a nice big cup of coffee. So I didn't realize the additional thing, this one's got a big chunk missing by the blinkers here. This one's got another piece. Well, we'll do the same thing we did on the other side. I guess these things are supposed to be such a tight fit, they rub on the engine. I don't know. Anyway, that's cracked in every possible spot it can be cracked. 4 holes here. This side's cracked down at the bottom. So to get, now here's the point that's important to know, to get it from that point to this point, so all the stuff is drying overnight, the time that's involved, you never really can rush these kind of things, because if you miss a spot or you skip a spot and there's a crack there, or going to be a crack, in fact I see one right up there, what's going to happen, I'll be looking at this real close to hopefully not, there's another one there, not miss any spots that might crack. Because when this job is done, I would hate to, after all this, have to disassemble a bike and redo it. So I put this in fast forward just so your video wouldn't get too long again. What's good about doing the second part, and as a general rule in all this kind of work, you do 3 parts. The second one goes faster than the first one, third one goes faster than the second one. That's just a general rule in this kind of production work. And in this case, the second part needed some attention down at that big chunk that's missing by the blinkers. Now, luckily, no matter what happens here, the finish on the outside of this is still reasonably nice, that when you assemble a bike and put it together, I don't think you're going to even see any of this, and hopefully not, but even if you did, I guess you could take a brush and get some matching paint and just go over the carbon fiber. But as far as I know, because I've never seen the bike in real life, but like I know on my FZR, I painted inside the fairing flat black, and I thought of one thing that I didn't think of right away on this job. One of the things we could have done is, if we knew for sure, for instance, if this was a Bimota part or something that was really unavailable at any price, we could have taken 1 sheet of carbon fiber and done the whole inside with a layer of carbon fiber, and then when that's all done, we would have had probably no chance at all that anything would have ever broken. But I think this is going to be a good repair. So the next step on this beautiful project for Vlad is going to be, everything has to dry overnight, the epoxy. If you try to do it when the epoxy isn't totally hard, you just make a mess. I've learned that the hard way. And then we're going to have to do a little fitting and finishing and dress off the edges and whatnot. But we will take care of that for sure in one more session. And then we can get back to riding. I'm kind of looking forward to it. We're missing some good riding days here. But Vlad, I know you appreciate it. And what can I say? When I see this bike coming down the road, I'll know we did a labor of love on it. Anyway, hope you did enjoy the video, pick up some good information, and thanks so much for watching. So I'm pretty sure after looking this over, I had a cup of coffee, looked it over. I don't think we missed any spots that are going to be a problem in the future. And I think for sure, well, you never know for sure, in one more work session, I'll be able to finish this, button it up, trim the edges off, clean up the carbon fiber, because if you don't do that, what happens is, if you don't run a little piece of sandpaper over that carbon fiber, there's little needles that are sticking out. You can catch your fingernail on one. So just for the fact, usually when you're working on a bike, you're not really aware of that until all of a sudden you're bleeding out of a fingernail. So, and carbon fiber can do that to you. It bites. It can be a problem. But anyway, this repair I think is going to do exactly what Vlad hoped it would do, and it's going to allow him to ride the bike until he makes a corporate decision as to what the next step on this is. Well, while he was here, we planned another project that I don't know if it's going to come to fruition this winter. Well, we'll see how it plays out when he comes to pick the parts up. But right now, I'm real happy the way this is playing out. So if you enjoyed the video, I hope you share it with your friends. And of course, I hope, most of all, that we'll see you tomorrow. And thanks again for watching.